The moving truck pulled away just as the sun began to set, leaving Yuki standing in front of her new townhouse with nothing but a sense of hope and a whole lot of unpacked boxes. She'd driven 12 hours to get here, and honestly, she was too tired to care that her furniture wasn't exactly where she wanted it. That could wait until tomorrow. Riverside Gardens looked exactly like the photos online. Neat rows of townhouses, perfectly trimmed hedges, and those little decorative lampposts that made everything feel safe and welcoming. After years of living in cramped apartments where you could hear your neighbors' conversations through the walls, this felt like a dream. Yuki had finally made it. A university teaching position, her own place, and a neighborhood that actually had trees. She spent the first few days in that beautiful chaos that comes with moving. Boxes everywhere, trying to remember which one had the coffee maker. Eating takeout because who knows where the pots and pans ended up. By day 3, she'd managed to set up her small backyard space just the way she liked it. Nothing fancy, just a simple stone lantern she'd inherited from her grandmother, a few potted plants, and a clear area where she could do her morning stretches and meditation. That's when she met Patricia. It was a Tuesday morning, around 9. Yuki was kneeling in her garden, trying to figure out the best spot for her hostas, when she heard someone clearing their throat loudly behind her. She turned to find a woman standing at the edge of her lawn, arms crossed, wearing an expression that suggested she'd just caught someone stealing her newspaper. "Excuse me," the woman said, not bothering with hello or any pleasantries. "Are you the new owner?" Yuki stood up, brushing dirt off her knees, and smiled. "Yes, I just moved in a few days ago." "I'm Yuki." The woman didn't return the smile. Her eyes scanned Yuki's yard like she was conducting an inspection. "I'm Patricia Thompson, vice president of the HOA board. I live 3 houses down." She pointed vaguely down the street, then immediately pointed at the stone lantern. "That needs to come down." Yuki blinked, confused. "I'm sorry, what?" "That structure," Patricia said, waving her hand dismissively at the lantern. "It's not approved. Section 4.2 of the HOA guidelines clearly states that all outdoor decorations must be pre-approved by the board. You can't just put up whatever you want." "Oh," Yuki said, keeping her voice calm and friendly. "I actually read through the guidelines before I moved in. I thought decorative garden ornaments under 3 feet were allowed as long as they're not offensive or in disrepair. This is only 2 feet tall and it's been in my family for years." Patricia's jaw tightened. "Well, clearly you misunderstood the rules. This is a community with standards. We work hard to maintain property values, and we can't have everyone doing whatever they please." She pulled out her phone and took a photo of the lantern. "I'll be documenting this. You have 1 week to remove it, or you'll receive a formal violation notice." Before Yuki could respond, Patricia was already walking away, typing something on her phone. No goodbye, no welcome to the neighborhood, nothing. Yuki stood there for a moment, processing what just happened. In all the years she'd dealt with difficult people, this was a new one. She'd encountered racism before, sure, the subtle kind mostly. The "where are you really from" questions, the compliments about how good her English was even though she was born in California. But this felt different, more aggressive, more personal somehow. She went inside and pulled out the HOA documents she'd received at closing. Sure enough, Section 4.2 did mention outdoor decorations, but there was a clear exception for garden ornaments under 3 feet that weren't commercial signage or political statements. Her grandmother's lantern was neither. It was just a lantern. That evening, Yuki called her friend Robert, who lived a few neighborhoods over. They'd met during new faculty orientation at the university, and he'd been helpful in showing her around town. "Welcome to HOA life." Robert laughed when she told him about Patricia. "Let me guess, Patricia Thompson. You know her?" "Everyone knows her. She's like the unofficial enforcer of Riverside Gardens. My friend Tom used to live there, 2 streets from you. Patricia made his life miserable for 6 months because his mailbox was the wrong shade of black." "Not kidding. The wrong shade." "He eventually just moved." Yuki felt her stomach sink. "So what do I do?" "Document everything," Robert said seriously. "Every interaction, every photo she takes, every complaint. Save all emails. Patricia's gotten away with this stuff because people either move or just avoid her. But from what Tom told me, she's not actually following the rules half the time. She just uses them as weapons against people she doesn't like." After hanging up, Yuki sat in her living room, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, and felt that familiar weight settling in. The weight of knowing that someone had already decided they didn't like her, decided she didn't belong without even knowing her name before today. But Yuki wasn't the type to run from problems. Years of training had taught her patience, discipline, and how to stay calm when everything inside wanted to react. She'd dealt with worse than an angry HOA board member. Much worse. Patricia didn't know it yet, but Yuki had been handling aggressive people since she was 7 years old. She just never had to throw a punch to do it. The stone lantern stayed exactly where it was. In the morning, Yuki would email the HOA president with photos of the guidelines and a polite explanation. She'd follow the proper channels, be respectful, and hope that reasonableness would win out. But something told her this was just the beginning. The email came 3 days later. Yuki was grading papers when her phone buzzed with a notification. It was from Patricia, with the subject line, "Violation Notice, 247 Riverside Gardens." The message was formal, cold, and CC'd to what looked like the entire HOA board plus half the neighborhood. The stone lantern was just the beginning. Over the next 2 months, Patricia found something wrong with everything Yuki did. Her car was apparently parked 6 inches too far from the curb, even though Yuki measured it herself and it was perfectly fine. Her trash bins were cited for being placed outside at 6:45 p.m. on collection eve, when the rule said 7 p.m. 15 minutes. Patricia had time-stamped photos to prove it. Then came the complaint about Yuki's garden gnome, a little ceramic figure her students had given her as a welcome gift. Patricia sent an email calling it ethnically inappropriate yard art because the gnome was wearing what she claimed was stereotypical Asian clothing. It was wearing a tiny red vest. That was it. Just a vest. Each violation notice came with photos. Patricia must have walked by Yuki's house multiple times a day, camera ready, looking for anything she could use. The emails got longer, more detailed, always with that same condescending tone. As a longtime resident who understands community standards, this and people who choose to live here must respect our way of life. That. Yuki responded to every email politely and professionally. She provided her own photos showing compliance with the rules. She quoted the actual HOA guidelines word for word. She kept her tone respectful even when Patricia's messages weren't. But nothing changed. If anything, it got worse. The really petty stuff started in week 6. Yuki came home from the university one afternoon to find Patricia's silver SUV parked directly behind her driveway. Not in front of it, not beside it, but right in the middle, blocking her completely. Yuki sat in her car for a moment, took a deep breath, and walked over to Patricia's house. She knocked on the door, prepared to be polite and reasonable. Patricia answered with a smirk. "Yes? Hi, Patricia. Your car is blocking my driveway. Would you mind moving it? That's a public parking area," Patricia said, examining her fingernails. "I can park wherever I want." "It's actually not. That's my driveway. I have the property survey if you'd like to see it." Patricia laughed, actually laughed. "Call a tow truck if you have a problem with it." "Oh, wait. They won't come because it's not illegal. Maybe you should have thought about parking issues before you moved here." She closed the door in Yuki's face. Yuki stood there on the porch, feeling her jaw clench. She walked back to her car, pulled into her neighbor's driveway to turn around and parked on the street. She took photos of Patricia's SUV blocking her driveway with timestamps, added them to the growing folder on her computer labeled Documentation. That night she called Robert again. "She's doing the same thing she did to Tom," Robert said, his voice frustrated. "She picks someone, usually someone she thinks won't fight back, and makes their life miserable until they leave. Tom tried talking to the HOA president, but Patricia's husband is on the board too. They're a package deal. So what did Tom do? He moved. Got tired of fighting it. But Yuki, you should know something. There was a family before Tom, black couple with 2 kids. Patricia did the same thing to them, but worse. Made comments about their music being too loud when they weren't even home. Called the cops once, claiming their teenage son looked suspicious walking in his own neighborhood. They got a lawyer involved, but eventually decided it wasn't worth the stress." Yuki felt something cold settle in her stomach. This wasn't just about her. This was a pattern. Has anyone ever actually stood up to her? Not successfully. She's careful, never says anything explicitly racist, never makes direct threats. Just death by 1,000 paper cuts, you know? Violations, complaints, making everything difficult. Most people either don't have the time or energy to fight it, or they're worried about making it worse. After hanging up, Yuki sat in her living room and thought about leaving. It would be easy. She hadn't even fully unpacked. But then she thought about the family before Tom, about Tom himself, about whoever would move in after her if she left. Patricia would just do it again. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. Yuki woke up at 5 in the morning like always, ready for her training session. She'd been practicing since she was a kid, and it was the one thing that kept her centered, that morning routine where she could clear her mind and find her balance again. She went to her backyard in comfortable clothes, started her stretches, moved into her forms. The movements were automatic after 27 years. Slow, controlled, precise. This was meditation in motion, the thing that kept her sane through graduate school, through job stress, through everything. She was halfway through her routine when she heard it. A phone camera clicking. She turned to see Patricia standing at the fence line recording her. Just documenting more inappropriate behavior, Patricia called out, "This is a residential neighborhood, not a gym. I'm sure the board will want to know about this disturbance." Yuki stopped mid-movement. "I'm exercising in my own backyard at 5 in the morning. I'm not making noise or bothering anyone." "We'll let the board decide that," Patricia said, still recording. Then, loud enough for any neighbors who might be listening, she added, "You people always think the rules don't apply to you." You people. There it was. Finally said out loud. Yuki stood perfectly still, her hands at her sides, breathing slowly. Every instinct from years of training told her to stay calm, to not react, to let it go. But something else, something deeper, said this had to stop. She walked inside, added the interaction to her documentation file, and made a decision. She wasn't leaving, and she wasn't going to keep quiet anymore. Tomorrow she'd talk to every neighbor Patricia had ever targeted. She'd find out exactly how many people had stories like hers, and then she'd take it to the HOA board meeting herself. Patricia wanted a fight? Fine. But she had no idea who she was fighting with. The annual HOA summer barbecue was supposed to be a friendly neighborhood gathering. Free burgers, potato salad, kids running around with sparklers. The kind of event where everyone pretends to like each other for a few hours and complains about property taxes. Yuki almost didn't go. She'd spent the last 3 weeks quietly talking to other neighbors, and what she'd learned made her sick. Patricia had targeted at least 5 families in the past 4 years. All of them were people of color. All of them eventually left. The pattern was impossible to ignore once you saw it, but Robert convinced her to attend. "You need witnesses," he'd said. "If she's drinking at these things like Tom mentioned, maybe she'll finally slip up and say something that can't be explained away." So there Yuki was, standing near the dessert table at Riverside Park, holding a plate of cookies she had no intention of eating. Her stomach was in knots. Across the lawn, Patricia was already 3 drinks in, getting louder with each one. "I'm just saying." Patricia's voice carried over the crowd. "Some people move into a neighborhood and think they can just change everything. No respect for how things have always been done." A few neighbors nodded along uncomfortably. Others found excuses to walk away. Yuki kept her distance, talking quietly with Mrs. Chen, an older woman who'd lived in Riverside Gardens for 20 years. "She tried this with my son when he moved in next door to me," Mrs. Chen whispered. "Complained about everything. But she stopped when she realized I've been here longer than her and know everyone on the board. She only goes after people she thinks are alone." That's when Patricia noticed Yuki. Her eyes narrowed, and she started walking over with that determined stride of someone who'd had just enough alcohol to say what they were thinking. Well, Patricia said loudly, positioning herself right in front of Yuki. Several neighbors turned to look. If it isn't our newest resident who thinks the rules don't apply to her. Yuki set down her plate carefully. "Hello, Patricia. Are you enjoying the barbecue?" "Don't change the subject," Patricia said, pointing a finger close to Yuki's face. "I know you've been talking to people about me, going around spreading lies, trying to make me look bad." "I haven't spread any lies," Yuki said calmly. "I've just been getting to know my neighbors." "Right, sure, I know what you're doing." Patricia's words were starting to slur. "You people always play the victim. Always making everything about race when really you just don't want to follow simple rules." The conversations around them had stopped. Everyone was watching now. "Patricia," Yuki said quietly, "you've had a lot to drink. Maybe we should talk about this another time. Don't tell me what to do. Patricia's voice rose even higher. You come into our neighborhood, you put up your weird decorations, you park wherever you want, and then you act like I'm the problem. This is America. We have standards here. If you don't like it, go back to wherever you came from. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the kids had stopped running around. Yuki felt her heart pounding, but her voice stayed steady. I was born in California, Patricia, and I have every right to live here, just like you. Oh, here we go, Patricia said, taking a step closer. Playing the race card. That's all you people know how to do. I am so sick of— That's enough, Robert's voice cut through as he stepped forward. Patricia, you need to leave. I don't take orders from you. Patricia spat, but she was looking at Yuki. And I don't take orders from her. She shoved Yuki's shoulder. Hard. Yuki stepped back from the force, but stayed on her feet. Her training kicked in automatically, every muscle in her body ready, but she kept her hands at her sides. Patricia, don't do this, she said. Or what? Patricia was beyond reason now. What are you going to do about it? She swung. A wild, uncoordinated punch aimed right at Yuki's face. What happened next took maybe 2 seconds, but to everyone watching it seemed to happen in slow motion. Yuki's body moved before she even thought about it. 27 years of training made it automatic. She shifted her weight, turned slightly, and Patricia's fist hit nothing but air. Patricia's own momentum carried her forward. Her feet tangled. She stumbled, arms windmilling, and fell onto the grass. Yuki never touched her. Not once. Patricia lay there for a moment, stunned, then started screaming. She assaulted me. Everyone saw it. She attacked me. That's not what happened, Mrs. Chen said immediately. You tried to hit her and you fell. I saw it too, said another neighbor, holding up his phone. I got the whole thing on video. You threw a punch and missed. She didn't touch you. More voices joined in, at least 6 people confirming the same thing. Patricia had attacked Yuki. Yuki had simply stepped aside. Robert helped Patricia to her feet even though she tried to slap his hand away. Her husband appeared from somewhere, his face red with embarrassment and anger. Not at Yuki, but at his wife. That's it, he said quietly. We're going home. Now. Patricia was still yelling about calling the police and pressing charges as her husband guided her toward their car. Most of it was incoherent, but everyone had heard enough. Yuki stood there, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Mrs. Chen put a hand on her shoulder. You okay, dear? Yeah, Yuki said, though her voice wasn't quite steady. I'm okay. Robert looked at her with new understanding in his eyes. Where did you learn to move like that? Yuki managed a small smile. I've been training since I was 7, but I never wanted to use it like this. I just wanted to live here in peace. Well, Mrs. Chen said, I don't think Patricia's going to be a problem much longer. Not after this. The barbecue slowly returned to normal, but everything had changed. People came up to Yuki to apologize for not speaking up sooner, to tell her their own stories about Patricia, to ask if she was really okay. And Yuki realized something. She'd been so focused on staying calm, on not making waves, on trying to be the perfect neighbor, that she'd forgotten something important. Sometimes you have to stand your ground. Sometimes staying silent just lets the problem continue. She didn't throw a punch. Didn't need to. Just stood her ground and let Patricia's own actions speak for themselves. Tomorrow would bring consequences. But tonight, for the first time in months, Yuki felt like she could finally breathe. Yuki was making coffee the next morning when the doorbell rang. She'd barely slept, replaying the previous night over and over in her head. Part of her kept wondering if she should have just stayed home, avoided the whole situation. But another part knew that hiding wasn't the answer anymore. She opened the door to find a police officer standing on her porch. A woman, probably in her mid-30s, with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. Good morning. Are you Yuki Tanaka? Yuki's heart sank. Patricia had actually done it. Called the police. Yes, that's me. I'm Officer Lisa Kim. I need to ask you some questions about an incident at the community barbecue yesterday. May I come in? Yuki nodded and stepped aside, her mind already racing through everything that had happened. But as the officer walked into her living room, something changed in her expression. Wait, Officer Kim said, looking at Yuki more carefully. Ms. Tanaka, from the Women's Self-Defense Program at TH. Yuki blinked. I'm sorry? You taught that 6-week course 2 years ago. I took your class when I was still working in the East Precinct. You probably don't remember me, but that class was amazing. You taught us how to break holds and escape from dangerous situations. The memory clicked into place. Yuki had volunteered to teach self-defense basics to women in the community. It had been one of her favorite things about her old neighborhood. Oh my God, yes. Officer Kim, I do remember. You were the one who asked all the questions about de-escalation techniques. Officer Kim smiled, but it faded quickly. I wish I was here under better circumstances. Patricia Thompson filed a report claiming you assaulted her at the barbecue yesterday. Yuki felt her stomach drop. That's not what happened. I know, Officer Kim said gently. I've already spoken to 6 witnesses and I watched the cell phone video. You didn't touch her, she tried to hit you and she fell on her own. But I still need to get your statement for the record. They sat down, and Yuki walked through the entire evening. Officer Kim took notes, asked clarifying questions, and listened without judgment. When Yuki finished, the officer set down her pen and sighed. Ms. Tanaka, I need to tell you something off the record, but this doesn't leave this room. Okay? Yuki nodded. Patricia Thompson has a history with our department. This is the 4th time in 3 years she's filed a false report against a neighbor. We've responded to multiple noise complaints that turned out to be nothing. She called in a suspicious person report once that turned out to be a teenage kid, walking home from school in his own neighborhood. The family almost sued the department over that one. Why hasn't anyone stopped her? Because she's careful. She never makes direct threats, never uses slurs where we can document them. And every time we investigate, she claims she's just a concerned citizen trying to keep her neighborhood safe. Her husband has connections too, which doesn't help. But this time is different. Officer Kim pulled out her phone and showed Yuki the video one of the neighbors had sent to the police. It was clear as day. Patricia shoving Yuki, then throwing a punch, Yuki simply moving out of the way. Patricia falling entirely on her own. This is attempted assault, Officer Kim said, and filing a false police report is a crime. I've already spoken with Patricia this morning. She has 2 options. Withdraw the complaint and accept responsibility, or face charges herself. What did she say? She's still insisting you attacked her. But her husband was there when I showed them the video. He was very upset. Not with you, with her. I think he's finally seeing what everyone else has been dealing with. Later that afternoon, Yuki got a call from David Chen, the HOA president. She'd met him once when she first moved in, a quiet man in his 60s who mostly seemed overwhelmed by the position. Ms. Tanaka, I owe you an apology, he said immediately. Several residents have come forward with complaints about Patricia's behavior. I should have done something sooner. Why didn't you? There was a long pause. Honestly, I was afraid of making waves. Patricia's been on the board for years. Her husband, too. They know all the rules inside and out, and they use that knowledge like a weapon. I thought if I just stayed neutral, things would settle down on their own. I was wrong. He told her that an emergency board meeting had been called for the next evening. 8 different residents had submitted formal complaints about Patricia's pattern of harassment. Robert had compiled years of documentation from families who'd left the neighborhood. The evidence was overwhelming. Her husband resigned from the board this morning, David said. He called me personally, said he was ashamed and that he should have stood up to her years ago. He's asking her to resign too. The next evening, Yuki sat in the community center meeting room with about 30 other residents. Patricia was there too, sitting in the back with her arms crossed, her husband beside her looking exhausted. David stood at the front and laid out the facts calmly and clearly, the pattern of harassment, the targeting of specific residents, the false complaints, the hostile behavior. When he finished, he looked directly at Patricia. You have 2 choices. You can resign from the HOA board immediately and attend counseling for anger management, or the board will vote to remove you and the HOA will pursue legal action for the liability you've created. Patricia started to argue, but her husband put a hand on her arm. For the first time since Yuki had known her, Patricia looked small, defeated. Fine, she said finally. I resign. The room was silent as she signed the resignation letter. She and her husband left without another word. After they were gone, several neighbors came up to Yuki. Mrs. Chen hugged her. Robert squeezed her shoulder. Others apologized for not speaking up sooner, for letting Patricia get away with it for so long. "You didn't just stand up for yourself," one neighbor said. "You stood up for all of us, for everyone who was too scared to fight back." Yuki felt tears prickling at her eyes. She'd been so focused on just surviving, on documenting everything and following the rules, that she hadn't realized what it would mean to finally push back. On the drive home, she thought about her sensei back in California, the old man who'd taught her that martial arts wasn't about fighting. It was about discipline, respect, and knowing when to stand firm. She'd never told Patricia about her training, never mentioned the tournaments she'd won, the black belt she'd earned at 16, the years she'd spent teaching others how to defend themselves. She didn't need to, because real strength wasn't about what you could do to someone else. It was about refusing to let anyone make you smaller than you were. And Yuki had never felt bigger than she did right now. 3 months passed quietly. The kind of quiet Yuki had hoped for when she first moved to Riverside Gardens. She could tend her garden without someone photographing her. She could park in her own driveway. Her stone lantern still stood exactly where her grandmother would have wanted it, catching the morning light just right. Patricia kept to herself now. Yuki would see her occasionally at the grocery store or getting her mail, but they never spoke. Patricia would look away quickly, hurry inside. It was like watching a completely different person from the one who'd blocked her driveway and recorded her morning exercises. The neighborhood changed too. People were friendlier, more willing to wave hello, to stop and chat. It was like everyone had been holding their breath for years, and finally someone had told them it was okay to exhale. Yuki was pulling weeds one Saturday afternoon when she heard footsteps on her walkway. She looked up to see Patricia's husband, Michael, standing there nervously, holding a small potted plant. "Hi," he said quietly. "I hope I'm not bothering you." Yuki stood up, brushing dirt off her hands. "It's okay. What can I do for you?" "I wanted to apologize properly." He held out the plant, a small Japanese maple. "I should have done this months ago. Years ago, honestly." Yuki took the plant carefully. "Thank you. But you already apologized after the board meeting." "I know. But I've been thinking about everything and I realized I never really explained." He looked down at his feet. "Patricia hasn't had an easy life. She grew up poor, fought for everything she got. When we moved here 15 years ago, some of the older residents looked down on us, treated us like we didn't belong because we weren't wealthy enough, didn't have the right background." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I think she started seeing threats everywhere. Started trying to control everything she could because she felt so powerless about everything else. And I let it happen. I made excuses. Told myself she was just protective of what we'd built. But really I was just too much of a coward to stand up to her." "Why are you telling me this?" Yuki asked gently. "Because you deserve to understand that none of it was about you. You were just the nearest target. And because Patricia wants to apologize too. But she's too ashamed to face you yet. She's been going to therapy twice a week, working through a lot of stuff." Yuki set the plant down carefully. "I appreciate you telling me this, Michael. And I'm glad she's getting help. But being hurt doesn't give anyone the right to hurt others." "I know. You're absolutely right. We just wanted you to know we're trying to do better." He started to leave, then turned back. "And thank you for not pressing charges. You would have had every right to." After he left, Yuki sat on her porch steps thinking about pain and how people carry it, about how hurt people really do hurt people, and how that cycle keeps going unless someone decides to break it. The following week, David Chen called her. "A few of us were talking and we'd like to offer you a position on the HOA board. We need people who actually care about making this a welcoming place for everyone." Yuki smiled but shook her head. "I appreciate it, but I think I'll pass. I've got enough on my plate with teaching. But I'll help however else I can." What she did agree to was teaching a self-defense workshop at the community center once a month. The first class had 8 women. The second had 15. By the third month, they had to move to a bigger room to fit everyone. Yuki loved it. Teaching had always been her passion, whether it was in a university classroom or on a practice mat. Watching people gain confidence, seeing them stand a little taller after learning they could protect themselves, that was worth more than any board position. One evening, She was locking up the community center after class when she saw Patricia sitting in her car in the parking lot. Their eyes met through the windshield. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Patricia got out of the car. She walked over slowly and Yuki could see her hand shaking. "I'm sorry," Patricia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For everything. I was cruel to you. I said terrible things. I tried to hurt you and drive you away, and you didn't deserve any of it." Yuki studied her face. Patricia looked older somehow. Tired, but there was something different in her eyes. Something that looked like genuine remorse. "Thank you for saying that," Yuki said. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I wouldn't forgive me. But I needed you to know that I see what I did. I'm working on understanding why I did it. And I'm trying to be better." They stood there in the parking lot as the sun set, two women who'd been enemies. Now just two people trying to figure out how to move forward. "I hope therapy helps," Yuki said finally. "I really do." Patricia nodded, tears in her eyes, and walked back to her car. That night, lying in bed, Yuki thought about her sensei again. He'd always said that real martial arts wasn't about the fighting. It was about discipline, respect, and understanding when to use your strength and when to show restraint. She'd trained for 27 years. Earned her black belt at 16. Competed in tournaments. Taught hundreds of students, but she'd never had to tell Patricia any of that. Never had to prove her skills or show off what she could do. All she'd had to do was stand her ground, document the truth, and let Patricia's own actions speak for themselves. The one time Patricia tried to hit her, Yuki simply stepped aside. Didn't strike back. Didn't need to, because that's what strength really was. Not the ability to hurt someone, but the choice not to. Not the power to fight, but the wisdom to know when fighting wasn't necessary. Her grandmother's stone lantern glowed softly in the backyard, visible through her bedroom window. It had been the start of everything, that little garden ornament. Patricia had wanted it gone, had seen it as something foreign and wrong, but it was still there. Standing quiet and peaceful exactly where it belonged, just like Yuki herself. She'd found a home here after all, not because she'd fought for it, but because she'd refused to be driven away from it, and that made all the difference. The neighborhood had learned something too. That silence in the face of bullying just lets it continue. That standing up for what's right sometimes means being uncomfortable. That a community is only as strong as how it treats its most vulnerable members. Yuki closed her eyes, finally at peace. Tomorrow she'd water her garden, grade some papers, maybe grab coffee with Robert and Mrs. Chen. Normal, beautiful, boring life. Exactly what she'd wanted all along.